Podcast friends, check out my upcoming show list to see if your city is on my tour, and if not, leave a comment for where I should go next. No regrets. How can we live lives with no regrets? Every time I think of this subject, I imagine, have you ever seen the tattoos of the guy who will get a full back tattoo of no regrets, but it's misspelled? It's like RGRETS or something. No regrets, you know? How do we live with that philosophy without being complete narcissists? When you hear the idea of having no regrets, that sounds a little psychologically dangerous. Like, well, look, I mean, if I run up to someone I don't know and slap them in the face for no reason, how insane would that be to not regret that? I am here to get way overly analytical about this, but make some decent points in the process, because that is what this podcast is. And I would like to suggest that the English language is missing some nuance here. We only have one word, regret, that encompasses a lot of different things. And as you follow all of my sage advice about just taking massive action and being a hot girl boss, or a hot boy boss. More and more male listeners are coming up to me after the shows. You're included too. You will find that one of the things that comes with just doing the thing, just discovering your blue flame, going out there and getting it and taking massive action, is you'll make mistakes, and you will be worried about jumping into something that you might have regrets about. And then you might do something that you look back, and I'm thinking of my single listeners, since I just talked to a bunch of them at shows. You know, you look back and you say, okay, you know what? I shouldn't have texted that ex at 2 a.m. after I'd had a couple martinis. I shouldn't have done that. So how do we live a life of quote unquote no regrets while making amends for things that we need to make amends for, and righting wrongs, but yet also not letting ourselves get mired down by the fear of future regrets, or weighed down by maybe mistakes we made in the past? That is the main subject of this episode. I am also going to talk about, on the day that this podcast airs, it will be my 20th wedding anniversary. On the day this podcast airs. So happy anniversary to us. I'll give you a few tips of not just how to stay married, but because whenever people are like, here are some tips for it's always like, well, but if I'm stuck in a boring marriage, honestly, that's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
We'd have to separate or something. I mean, I'm pro marriage, you know, I'm pro marriage, but we'd have to live in separate places or something if I had a boring marriage. That's just not an option. And my husband and I, Caitlin can confirm, she knows us both, we are as crazy as ever. We're probably more spontaneous than we were when we first met. And we're just constantly, I don't know, almost daring each other to see who can like do the crazier things in life. And we both individually live very interesting lives, but we both feel like we make each other's lives more interesting. Now, having very severe untreated ADHD in both of our cases helps, because both of us have that personality type. We can't be bored for 5 seconds. I mean, just extreme ADHD in both cases with us. So that's probably tip number one, is if you have ADHD, don't treat that. And you'll see it'll lead you to a real wild marriage. Cops involvement sometimes. I will say I'm trying to think, how many times have the cops been involved in our relation? I had 4. No, it wasn't
for domestic violence.
No. Yeah, right. Let me jump in to say it wasn't domestic violence. It was like us being intoxicated and dressed as clowns, or like yelling at. Yeah, never mind. It's all fine. Everything is fine over here. I'm just saying there is a tally of like the number of times the cops have had to settle us down. So the main thing though, we had this, we had our team, we put our best men on this, crafting a sound effect for when I have a big announcement. Hit the big announcement sound effect. Okay. Oh, nothing but excellence on this podcast. I have an enormous big announcement. You are the first to know, unless you are on my Patreon or email list, in which case you already know. Other than that, you are the first-ish to know. I am filming my next comedy special November 15th, Houston, Texas. Let me emphasize to you, this is going to be so much fun. This is going to be this is a special that has been 2 years in the making of me putting this material together. This is my first comedy special since I've been represented by my manager and by United Talent. It's a really big deal. If I were you, I'd fly out for it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is, one of the reasons I filmed it in a hub city so that it's easy to get to. Where do you live? Flights to Houston, they're not that expensive. My Canadian listeners, it's not that expensive to get to Houston. Everyone flies into IAH. It's fine. A hobby. There are 2 airports there. This is not hard to get to. So fly into Houston. Hotels are cheap. I was actually just looking at hotels near the venue. They're pretty cheap. Houston is a fun city, so you should fly out even if you're not in Houston. But I will tell you this, 100% it's going to sell out. I'm doing 2 shows and I expect it to sell out quickly. So do not procrastinate on this. Do not procrastinate on getting your tickets. The links are in the show notes. They're right on this episode, link in the show notes. Eventually they'll be on my website, but they might not be if you're hearing this early on the day of release. Link to the Houston tickets. I'm doing 2 shows in one day is in the show notes. And seriously, if you want to come, get in early. Even if you're a friend of mine. My mom listens to this podcast. Mom, listen, if you don't buy tickets, I'm sorry you can't get it because it's a special filming. I can't be messing around with all these different comps. Like I need to know who is seated where. This cannot be like a lot of my shows where my friends at the last minute, they want to come and they want 6 comps. This ain't like that. Everyone has to buy their tickets, and no, I cannot get in anyone who doesn't have a ticket. Sorry, Mom. Okay, maybe my mom.
I'm working.
Nobody. Yeah. Caitlin, if you put your ear to the door really closely, you might be able to hear the show. No, Caitlin is working the show, so Caitlin will 100% be there. But so link is in the show notes. Get tickets. Totally going to sell out. So this, and again, this is a momentous thing for me. Filming this special is a really, really big deal for me. I have been working on this material, getting soul-crushing feedback from my manager for 2 years. And then going up at the comedy clubs in Austin where nobody knows who I am. It'll be like a bar show. No one knows who I am. Everyone in the audience is like 24, 25, cannot relate to my life at all. Everyone's high, not a sober person in the audience. The whole room smells like marijuana, and there are like 16 people in attendance. And I go up with my little clean comedy set, and I figure out how to make these people laugh, and it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. So I have been through the psychological meat grinder to get this special together. It's the one I'm touring with, actually. So if you go to any of my shows on this tour, I mean, that's basically what I'm filming, but it will be extra special that November 15th, Houston, and I'll probably talk about this on the Village Hustle Patreon, that I had to girl boss my way into making this happen. This was not handed to me, and I have had to fight for this special. So it's all very exciting, deeply personal to me. jfcomedytour.com is the website. You know what? If only we had a catchy jingle to help you remember that.
Jen Fulwiler is hitting the road on the maternal instinct tour, so watch where she goes. Just go to jfcomedytour.com. jfcomedytour.com.
Now, that link is mildly irrelevant right now because, again, I'm not sure when my team is actually going to have the Houston links on there. But, again, They're in the show notes. This is why you should be on my email list so that you don't have to rely on show notes. All right, new listeners, welcome to the Jen Fulwiler Show. I am your host, Jen Fulwiler. We are coming to you from our studio in Austin, Texas. I am a stand-up comic, best-selling author, and mom of 6. This podcast is where you learn the art of the village hustle. That is being a hot girl, girl boss, or hot boy, boy boss who knows that love and family and community are the foundation of all true success. Caitlin White is our fabulous producer. We publish new episodes every Wednesday morning without missing a beat ever. And you can get all sorts of fabulous bonus content on Patreon, patreon.com/thisisjen. And the link is also in the show notes. I just want to say, I think episode 175, the previous episode to this one, was really good. And Caitlin, round of applause for yourself for pulling that one out of the fire. I just have to brag on Caitlin for a second. We recorded episode 175 last week, and then I left for my Washington, D.C. show. So I had 3 shows, 3 cities, 3 days. It was D.C., Philly, Boston, just back to back, one day after another. And Caitlin said, hey, I just listened to the audio from the podcast, and it is completely messed up. And then, and I said, but that's weird because in your headphones, it sounded okay. So long story short, we realized the board that we record through was fine. It was something with the computer itself. So I said, oh, wait a minute. We have a backup recording that's on the board, but it meant Caitlin would have to do like an hour and a half of driving to get back up to the studio, then back down. I mean, she's got kids. She has to get up for school, like all that sort of thing. And she did it, and she got that episode out on time. I was so impressed. I told her, look, if the episode goes out a day late, it'll be the first time that's happened in a year and a half, but whatever. I mean, it was a technical issue. And that's also why we just did a transcript of the after party on Patreon, because that there was that technical issue. The audio was just unusable because we didn't get the backup for that. Anyway, the point is that Caitlin is incredible. And thank you so much, Caitlin, for making that episode happen. So as of the moment that you are hearing this is my 20th wedding anniversary. My husband and I had a wedding where we wrote our own vows and we didn't rehearse it at all. And I wore a dark purple dress because I was an atheist and I had to make some statement about how I don't follow Judeo-Christian traditions. And we didn't have wedding cake at our wedding. We didn't have bridesmaids, groomsmen. There was no bouquet toss. I just had to blow it up. I think also my parents had gotten divorced after 35 years of marriage that same year. And that doesn't lend itself to fun wedding planning. I was like, are we really going to stick with this? I was very cynical about it. So we did not rehearse these vows that we wrote ourselves, and they were only 7 minutes long. So people flew. Joe has friends all over the world that came out for this, and they ended up just seeing a 7-minute ceremony. It was incredible. Good segue into the no regrets topic, but I will say is that my secret, I think, for having a marriage that is not just good, but fun, is that you're always pushing limits and building and using your blue flames together. I always say, marry someone who wants to build in the same ways that you do. Build a family, or build a business, or build a career, or just build a stable suburban life, or build a stable small town life, or build a farm. Building together, I think, is a really important part of a successful marriage. And if you're married to someone that you want to build in a certain way and they just won't support it, and even if you've explained it to them and tried to get them on board, that's a problem. You got to go to some major marriage counseling for that, because your spouse should want to build with you in some way or another. And so I think that's one of the biggest secrets of our marriage, is that my husband and I like to build in the same ways, and we support each other in building in those ways. And so many of our conversations ultimately are about building. Again, even if it's getting more involved in our neighborhood fantasy football league, that's building something. That's building community. And we're always thinking in that forward progress sort of way. And we just don't let life stagnate. That's just, it's you could say it's one of our core values of our marriage. We've never actually written out what our core values are, but a core value is something that you just, if everything else has to be sacrificed, you're not going to not do this one thing. This is a key part of your life or your marriage. And I think for us, that idea of always building, always doing something new, always keeping life interesting, that's a core value. And it means we sacrifice other things. It means, like, for example, the house is not perfectly tidy all the time, by which I mean it's trashed a lot of the time, because for us, it's a core value. But my husband and I would both rather do interesting things and have interesting conversations than keep the house clean. Now, this will all be moot when the comedy trillions come in and we have daily housekeeping and a live-in, we'll have a live-in chef and a live-in... maybe nanny. I mean, my kids are getting older now. Definitely live-in housekeepers, live-in professional organizer. Right now, our house is 1,900 square feet. So, I mean, as long as they're cool with like crashing on the couch, like 2 people on one couch, that would be cool. That's fine. We could make that work now. But that's an example of a core value that we just don't care if the house is messy, as long as we have had some epic conversation about some crazy thing we could do. Like, he wants to sail from Aruba to Virginia, which, by the way, he just did. And I want to film this comedy special. And yeah, the house is getting trashed while we're having those conversations. But that's our core value. So know your core values. Even I'm not saying you have to write them down like you're in a business strategy session, but having some idea of what matters in your relationship is good. And I think that would have helped us know earlier on that we should definitely get married and it was going to be epic. If we had, when we were dating, if we said, what are your core values? What are your non-negotiables in life? Now, I was young enough. I don't think I knew what my non-negotiables were, but If I had been more self-aware, I would have seen that really life has to be interesting. I mean, I cannot have a boring life. That was like one of my big things. And if we had, and my husband is the same way, and if we had articulated that earlier, I think we could have been married 21 years and not taken so long to get engaged, because it would have been clear that we were a good couple. And then the final thing is, I've told you before, you have to run PR for your spouse. You should have a culture in your house where you and your spouse run PR for each other. And here's what I mean. That each one of you sees the flip side, the positive flip side of the annoying things that the other person does. I fully admit my husband started this. He was in, it's very sweet that he started this, but he's a neat person. He does prefer the house to be a little tidy. And when I was staying home with the kids, it was kind of on my plate to keep the house nice. You can imagine how that went. He would just come home and the house would be a disaster so much of the time. And his reaction to that was, we have to find a way to afford more housekeeping help. And I kind of thought he'd be like, why is my wife so lazy? Why does she never clean the house? And he was like, you've got that very neurodivergent brain of yours. And he said, but also you're very creative and you're an artist. And he's like, I just couldn't expect you to clean the house. Like, your brain just doesn't work like that. So we just have to figure out a way. And by the way, this was in our account constantly overdrawn season. We did not have lots of money to throw around at that time. And so that was really a very kind take that my husband had when he saw the positive flip side to his wife being a slob. And based on that, I tried to do the same thing, that if there was something he did that annoyed me, I'd say, okay, what is the personality trait that is the positive flip side of this, of this thing that rubbed me the wrong way? And man, I'm telling you, that will lead to a pretty strong marriage. If you do that, if you're constantly running PR for your spouse, that you say, yeah, that's pretty annoying that they do this, but the positive flip side of it is that, you know, they're like this and that, and there's a positive other side of it, that will lead you to having a really, really fun marriage, and a marriage where you can each grow and become better people from your marriage. So happy 20th anniversary to us. We're doing nothing to celebrate. Maybe here's a bonus tip. Know each other's love languages, and neither one of us have gifts as a love language. We almost never exchange gifts. So I don't know what we're doing. I have shows in San Antonio and New York. No, San Antonio and Dallas. I'm sorry. San Antonio and New York was, yeah. Excuse me. So yes, that's how we're celebrating. And then my husband is going to a sailing class in another city at some point. So I don't know when we're celebrating, but we really feel like, this sounds cliche, but we really feel like we kind of have fun and encourage each other every day. And I think when you feel filled up in that way every day, the holidays like Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, our anniversary are not that important to me. I mean, one, because I'm just not a holiday gifts person. That's not an area of interest. I mean, I'm not good at it. I don't, that's not my thing. But it's also that I think because we have some good things going on with understanding each other's love languages and trying to build that up every day, it puts less importance on anniversaries, because I feel like I'm getting nice things on a pretty regular basis. So it's not like, hey, you were a schmo who neglects me 364 days a year, but it's our anniversary, so you better make it count. All right, so there are my tips. And by the way, we don't have a perfect marriage or relationship. I mean, we've had some epic issues, so I'm not saying at all that we have everything all figured out. But I will say we have fun. I will say we're 10 out of 10 on having fun together. Mm-hmm. So now you might hear that I'm sick. Here's a little spontaneous interlude on the topic of being sick and when you don't feel well. We are headed into flu season, so even if you feel fine right now, it's coming. Tuck this one away. So one of the most important things when you don't feel well is to give yourself buffer. Push everything back. Take that day off of work. Or if you don't work, get that babysitter for the kids, or the person who needs you to email them that thing. Push that thing back. Just push it all back so that you can get some time to just lie in bed or take a walk or do whatever you need to do to feel better. Now, you guys aren't going to do any of that. I know you. I just know that you're not. You say, oh, that, yeah, yes, Jen, sounds good. Sounds like that would be nice. But you won't. And I think that is because you, my dear podcast listeners, who I feel like I know very well because you guys come out to shows and we chat after the show. I feel like I know you guys very well, and you're so sweet. You're very kind people. You're very conscientious people. You're very thoughtful people. And I think one of the reasons you don't give yourself the buffer in life that allows you to process times when you are sick and give yourself a little extra space is because it involves a lot of emotional management of other people. So, for example, when I came home from Boston, again, 3 shows, 3 cities, 3 days, Caitlin was with me on that trip, and she saw that I was not doing well already when we were leaving Boston, and it got worse the day after we got back, and it just became very clear that this health situation was unraveling, and I had gotten sick. Not the most surprising thing in the world, given my schedule, and so I had to turn to a bunch of people who are waiting on things from me. People who had texted me, "Hey Jen, just following up. Didn't know if you saw my email, but I need that thing from you." with my husband saying, hey, I was going to do this dinner. We have people coming over this night, but I just can't do it. I need you to do it. When you are living a villageless life where on a daily basis you are doing the job of 15 people, which most of you are, it all falls apart when you get sick because you're not just delegating the work of one person, which is how life should be. You're delegating all these different hats that you're wearing. You're the chauffeur, you're the cook, you're the maid, you're the laundry person, you're the homework helper, you're the one who talks to the kids about what's going on with them, gets them new clothes, gets them new pair of socks when your kids wear mixed matched socks to school. Which, as an aside, can we just make that a trend that kids wear Mitch Math? I see. I'm too sick to talk. Can we make it a trend that kids wear mismatched socks to school? Because I can't keep up with kids and socks. And someone's going to email me and say, Jen, you should buy the same color sock. Like, just get the same brand and color socks, and
but
then
I have different size feet.
See, thank you.
Feet.
They have different size feet, and by the way, I realize I'm on a tangent, and I will get back to the main subject. Tangent alert! Oh. Tangent alert! Sound effect. What socks are? They have a cosmic connection to another dimension where they proliferate on their own. The greatest evidence I've ever seen for there being a rip in the space-time continuum is the sock situation in my house. Socks are constantly coming and going from my house in ways that I cannot control. It will be like, wait, I thought that I got this kid only white, simple socks to keep it simple, but now we have a pink and yellow polka dot stripe sock here that I've never seen before, but there's just one of them. And see, that came from the other sock dimension, which absolutely exists and sends socks into your house, but only in singles. They never in pairs. And then there's like a trade because it sends the new random socks that you've never seen before. And then it sucks out some of the socks that you actually bought and cared about and wanted to keep, but only in ones, only single socks. So then you will have those white socks that you bought for your 10-year-old and your 3-year-old, but you only have one of the 10-year-old sock and one of the 3-year-old sock. And I want to tell you that I have peace with this situation. I no longer spend any mental energy trying to manage socks in my house. My children just wear oh dear Lord, what is wrong with me? My children just wear mismatched socks all the time because I can't fight a hole in the space-time continuum. That is bigger than me. And I do know after 18 years of parenting 6 kids that the sock hole does exist. And I can't control. Who am I? Who am I to fight with a black hole? You know, I can't. And so my kids wear socks that don't match. See, getting around that word now. My kids wear socks that don't match. And I would like to suggest that we make that a trend. Who's with me? Leave a comment on my YouTube. See, the great thing about me getting my 5 views on YouTube each week, jfonyoutube.com, is you guys can leave comments there now and I can see them. Previously there was not a way. So if you're with me in making the not matching socks a trend, let me know. Leave a comment on YouTube. Okay, so if you are the one who does all of this stuff in your house, you are living with no buffer. You are living with no margin. And so you can imagine that when you get sick, this is just a house of cards that just falls. I mean, you were barely holding it together. And let me give you an example from I've told you guys many times before that I interviewed some of my elderly relatives in it was probably like 2006. And one of them was about 100 years old. So she was born in like 1910. And I have videos of this. I need to find them and get them digitized. But I asked them everything about what life was like. So this was rural. They lived in rural Texas, came of age in 1915, 1920, things like that. And one of the things that became very clear to me is that because they didn't have electricity, at least, not for many years out in rural Texas, there was so much buffer in their days because there's not much you can do in terms of productivity in pitch blackness. Camping people probably know this. What do you do when you're out, living your Stone Age lifestyle and camping? You do boring stuff, like you sit around a stupid fire and you talk and you get drunk. That which I see, that's like there's nothing else to do. And it's just hours of this because there's nothing else to do. You can't be on your trillionaire grind set. Sad. It's sad when you're camping. It's just when it's just inky black darkness outside that you can't do anything. And so people pre-electricity, which was like basically everyone in human history. I mean, in human history, electricity it's only been here for a millisecond compared to the rest of human history. They had this kind of buffer of you never planned to do anything after the end of the day, the end of the sunlight. And so there was a little bit of buffer there for you to rest. And it kind of enforced rest. So maybe you were a woman who did the washing for your family and you got behind on it because you were sick. There was no staying up and doing the washing until midnight, unless maybe one of my it's like a great cousin of mine. She's the one who was born in like 1910. Unless maybe it was a full moon. Maybe if it were like an absolute full moon with no cloud cover, you could go outside on the washboard and finish your washing. But then you get attacked by a coyote. It didn't work. So you were resting every night from, let's say, 6 p.m. until 6 a.m., whether you wanted to or not, because you didn't have electricity and there was no light. So you guys, my podcast listeners, you're living 1,000 lives every day because you have electricity. You can just flip on the lights and keep doing all this stuff until 1 o'clock in the morning. So when you get sick, it's seriously like 5 lives worth of people that are all collapsing now because you're doing so much in a given day. And when you are sick, as I am right now, you need to radically create buffer, and it will be a little painful because if you're a people pleaser, there are a lot of people that you're going to be worried are disappointed, and your temptation will be to say, especially for my American listeners, we're the worst at this. My American listeners would be like, listen, I have Ebola. Blood is coming out of every bodily orifice, like a fire hose. So I know I was supposed to get that document to you by 3 p.m. today. If I could have until 5 p.m., I would really appreciate that while I just give me a little extra space with this Ebola situation I'm dealing with. That's how you guys are. You need to give yourself, push it back for all the days you think you'll be sick, and then a couple days after that to give yourself some extra recovery time. Now, again, I know if you have a job and it's like, well, I'll be fired from my job if I do that. That sucks. And I understand why people post anti-capitalist screeds on Twitter, like when you end up in a situation like that. But just do everything you can. That's all I'm saying. And don't babysit other people's emotions. When you get sick and you realize, okay, all right, this is it. This ain't allergies. Here we go. It's the real thing. It's happening. The first commitment you are going to make is that you will stop babysitting other people's emotions. You will ask for what you need and not worry about how it impacts other people, because you are in a fragile state, because you are sick, and any issues that come up, you will be much better equipped to resolve if you can just get better as fast as possible. And if you're running around trying to people please and do all these things, you will not get better that quickly. So first thing you do when you realize you're getting sick is stop caring what anyone thinks about anything. Push back everything. Tell people it's that thing I said I'd have to you on Monday. It will be Friday, and it will be Friday end of day, maybe even next Monday, because I'm sick and I need this time. And ask your spouse, spend some political capital with your spouse, any kind of support system you have. If you've ever called in a favor, do it now. That babysitter, get the babysitter in there to help you. Like any kind of help you can get, and do not babysit other people's emotions, and do not care what people think about you. A lot of you guys have more of a support system than you realize, but you just don't want people to see your house, right? Mm-hmm. You've got that neighbor who has said, hey, if you ever need an extra pair of hands with the kids, I'd be happy to help for a few hours here and there. I'm retired. I'd love to help you. You haven't taken her up on that because your house is a mess and you're embarrassed for her to come over. So it's not really that God hasn't sent you any kind of support system. It's that you're embarrassed for people to see your mess. You got to get rid of all that. Because also don't worry, you can still be a fraud when you're sick. Because you can be like, normally my house looks like, if you've ever seen those houses on Instagram, that's exactly what my house normally looks like. And, I know I've only been sick for a day, but a lot has really unraveled over here in a day. And I know it looks like we chronically live in filth, but no, this place was sparkling 48 hours ago. So that's actually a great time to get a little help from your support system, because you can just blame being sick on your house being an absolute disaster, and then just don't invite them back over for a while, and they'll never know. So stop caring what people think of you. Stop babysitting other people's emotions, and just get the space that you need to recover. And realize that the reason this feels hard is because you don't have a village. And on a typical day, you are doing the job of seriously 9 people. And so that's why it feels such a big deal for you to take this time off. That is why it's such a problem. So that is my little spiel for when you feel sick. Hopefully I will not keep feeling sick. I have shows in Dallas and San Antonio this week, but don't worry, guys. I will say, we are recording this on a Monday. My shows aren't until Thursday and Friday, and I am on the mend. And honestly, I've been sicker than this and done shows. I've been way sicker than this. Ask the people in Madison, Wisconsin. I had a fever of 103.5, and I still showed up at that event, and I was still on stage. And honestly, it was a fine show. I'm a little bit too intense of a person, and so it's maybe even a better performance when I'm sick, because it forces me to chill out a little bit. You might notice on this podcast, I'm not yelling as much as I normally do, because I have much more of a calm vibe today, because I am sick. Okay. Let us go to the main topic. Before I get into it, don't forget, we have a link in the show notes to brain.fm. The reason I promote brain.fm is because I personally started using it, and it completely changed my life and my creative process. It's an app where you tell the app how many minutes you want to work or whatever, and it'll count it down and play, I don't know, brainwave focused music, whatever. My college-age son has said to me multiple times, he's like, this has changed my college experience having this app. You can get the premium subscription 20% off with the code GENF. That is Jen with one N, JENF. And I honestly don't know where you put it in. You might need to go to their website, brain.fm. But as I've said before, even if you don't use my code, just get this app, because I really like it. And I actually requested to promote them. They didn't come to me. I came to them because I was like, this app is great. I should talk about it on my podcast. So brain.fm, link is in the show notes to get your discount with my code GenF. Okay, so No regrets. This topic is very much on my mind right now since I'm filming my comedy special in Houston on November 15th. I have a lot of big decisions to make about this, and I personally have a fair amount of financial involvement in this special, and I have decisions that I need to make. That it's like, should I spend this large amount of money on this one thing that would definitely make the special better, but does it really matter? And will I ever see that money again? Will it be the kind of thing that this will lead to greater name recognition for me? I'll be doing bigger shows and bigger venues, and I'll say, wow, the comedy millions are here. Caitlin is driving her BMW. I'm driving my Tesla Plaid, and I'm so glad that I invested that money. Oh, you know what? I'll be like one of the podcast bros. You know how the podcast men who like they've never spent a day actively raising children, and but they have all these ideas about how life should work. And most of them are single, and the ones who aren't single, their wives are like doing everything for their family, and they openly admit this, but they have life advice for all of us. And so you'll see them on Instagram. It'll be some intense music in the background, and it'll be like, well, you know, I took a bet on myself and I blah, 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 and now I'm a gazillionaire, and it cuts to them stepping on their private jet. I can't wait to do those interviews. When I'm at the apex of success, when Huberman, Andrew Huberman, he is going to be like, listen, my little neuroscience podcast is not complete without hearing about the extraordinary success of Jen Fulwiler. Can we hack into her brain and get her galaxy brain insights about life? I'm telling you, I'll do the Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan, and I'll just sit there and I'll be super serious. Look, for those of you on YouTube, I have glasses. I could put on these glasses, and I'll be like, you know, what I think the secret of success really is. I'm so ready for this. I'm so ready for my like Secrets of Success podcast tour. And so now all I need is the success. That is the only thing that is standing between me and my Secrets of Success podcast tour is the actual success. But then I will be ready. By the way, I did talk about my Secrets of Success. There's a comedy podcast called Hot Breath, and I went into this stupid financial risk I took on myself, which paid off, but was stupid. If you Google Jen Fulwiler Hot Breath, that's the name of the podcast, and it's on YouTube. And I actually, that was a little bit of my, you know, secrets of my success. Okay. So anyway, one of the things that I would love to be able to tell the story of, like, yeah, I spent all this extra money on this one thing with my special. And you know what? I think that is what led Jimmy Fallon to become so obsessed with me that he started stalking me. And so when it made the news that he showed up at my house and was like, no, please, I beg you to teach me more about comedy, and then he got arrested for that, that was kind of like the beginning of my worldwide fame. And so I am so glad that I spent all that money, because, you know, now here we are on my 100-foot yacht. And, you know, Caitlin has a man with, you know, some leaves fanning her and peeling her grapes over there. And we just really feel like that decision I made to invest a little more in this special than I needed to paid off. So that is one path. That's absolutely a path it could go. Or I could look back and I could say, I put this large amount of money into my comedy special, and had I taken that same amount of money out in cash and thrown it into the cauldron of an active volcano, I would have gotten about the same amount of value for it. It did not improve really anything. It did not make any marginal difference. And Jimmy Fallon has not obsessed with me yet that we know of. And so, yeah, I probably did not need to waste that amount of my personal funds. So I'm thinking a lot about this subject of not just having regrets, but then fearing that you will have regrets based on your decisions. Because when when you feel stuck in life, or your life is a train wreck, or you're just kind of ready to move on to the next thing, you know, I always tell you, you need to take massive action. Stop thinking about it. Stop pontificating about it. Even if it's something small, like you'd like to find your passion, your thing, your blue flame. Well, stop thinking and start doing. You need to go fail at 100 things. That's how you're going to find it. And you have to do it with passion and with verve. Like, you can't just you know, half-heartedly jump into these things. So it takes massive action, but one of the reasons that we are afraid to take massive action is because we are afraid that we will have regrets. Again, in my case, that I put a significant amount of money into doing some nice extras for my special that is, you know, really a pinch to invest that much. But what if I look back and say, yeah, I did not need to spend that. It didn't really make a difference. That I worry that I will have that regret. So here's how I've learned to handle these kinds of things, because I do think that living a life of no regrets is important if you are defining the word regret correctly. So here's where I would like to tell you that I think that the English language needs a breakdown of words that are similar to regret, but that have different nuances. I think the English language is faulty in the sense that we need multiple words here, and we only have one, and it's kind of clunky. You've probably heard that the Inuits have multiple words for snow. They don't just say snow. There's one word that means light snow. There's another word that means falling snow. I'm sick. That's why I can't talk today. There's another word that means deep snow. So they've got whole different words that talk about different types of snow, because obviously that is very relevant to their life, living above the Arctic Circle and whatnot. For those of us who live lives of massive action, and we're also a little bit neurodivergent, we end up having a lot of regrets, quote unquote. And so I think we need a breakdown of these terms so that we can psychologically process them correctly. I would like to propose we need one word for regret, meaning I did something that primarily impacts me, or it's a primarily financial impact. Nobody was psychologically wounded by this. So let's say, for example, you work at Goldman Sachs. You're a financial person. You work on Wall Street. You make $1 gazillion a year. Your company makes $1 gazillion trillion a year. And you do a trade that didn't work out well. So you could have made a profit of 2.8 mil that day, and you only made a profit of 1.2 mil. Okay, so that is one type of regret. There's a second type of regret when you have hurt someone else. This could have a lasting psychological impact on them. Like if you forgot your kid's birthday or something. That is that is very different than the Wall Street trader example, and I would say far worse than the losing millions of dollars for a big corporation. So I think we need two different words for regret. In the first kind of regret, where let me just choose. Let me choose an example at random. Are you ready for me to just pull something out of the blue?
Always.
Okay, let's say that you're a stand-up comedian and you're filming a comedy special. I'm just making stuff up. It's crazy.
So crazy.
and the high-end producer who is like insanely impressive, and you can't believe you're working with them, that is producing this, is mentioned that there are a couple of things that some people do, you don't have to do. It would be thousands of dollars more, but it is, if you want to add this, you can to this particular filming, but nobody else is going to pay for it. It's going to be you or nothing. Isn't this a random example? I don't know where I came up with this stuff. It's never. You might worry that you will have to go to your spouse in some months and be like, that's money that we just flushed down the toilet. I mean, I just lost that money for us. And boy, is that embarrassing, putting it into this this career that now, I don't know that we'll ever see that money again. And now I personally feel like a failure. So somebody could say that. The way you avoid that kind of regret or deal with it if it happens. So we're talking mostly financial. You did not psychologically wound anyone except maybe yourself. The way you prevent that kind of thing is, first, you don't rush. In a lot of business situations, especially if you're dealing with people who are not super professional, they will often rush you to make decisions. And man, if there's one thing that I have learned in being in business for 20-something years now, don't rush big decisions. And if you have that feeling that I got to do this now, no, 99 times out of 100, that is a red flag that something's going on. Either someone is pressuring you into this, or you're making the decision out of fear. So the best way to avoid ending up in those kind of regret situations is don't make the decision out of fear. Not fear that, you're going to disappoint the used car salesman. Like, I don't know, he told me that he's not going to be able to feed his family if I don't sign on the dotted line right now. So you're not making decisions out of fear of what other people think. You're not making decisions out of fear that another opportunity will never come your way again if you don't take this one opportunity right now. If you reject all that fear and you reject feeling rushed and you foster that feeling of abundance and trust meaning, there's a higher power here. Someone else is running this show and it's not me. And if I'm meant to be in this space, if I'm meant to do this kind of work or do this thing, or if our family is meant to have this one house or whatever, that it'll all work out. Somehow it will work out. And I have that trust, and I will not let myself get pressured into making a decision out of fear. So if you're making the decision in calm and in trust and with slowness, I feel like there has to be a better word. Basically, you're not rushed. Then it is unlikely that you will end up with that type of regret, that financial lighter level of regret, because even if the decision goes sideways and it actually does not end up being a good decision, you can feel good about the fact that you took your time and maybe you asked other people what they thought. You were not attached to it. You were not clingy. You were not saying, oh, no, never get an opportunity like this again. Your hands were open and ready to receive whatever. See, I'm trying to make this more of a general audience, but whatever your higher power. I'm not just talking about the Catholic God here, okay? Just whatever, you had your hands open, ready to receive whatever life has for you. When you make decisions from that point of view and in that place, it's unlikely that you will regret them. And let me tell you, I recently spent $800 on something that I wish I had not. That is no small amount of money, and I feel like I flushed it down the toilet. But when I look back on it, I made the decision from the right place. I did not feel rushed. I was calm. I felt good about it. I felt good about the reasons that I made that decision to purchase this thing, and it didn't end up working out. Basically, I lost the money. But I don't regret that in the sense that I made the decision from the right place. None of us can know the future. I've told you that I read a book by a poker player who made the great point that in order to keep your sanity in poker, you have to distinguish between good decisions, good and bad decisions, and good and bad outcomes. So, if you, let's say you buy a house and everything about it was perfect and it just looked amazing and it was great and you did all your due diligence. But then it turns out, I don't know, there's like a toxic waste dump under it that is discovered a few years later that nobody could have known about. I don't know. That it was a good decision. It was just a bad outcome. And vice versa. Sometimes I forget what it was, but the other day I was like, whew, that was a bad decision, but I did get a good outcome, but like that was a bad decision. One of the most sanity-saving things you can do is distinguish between good and bad decisions and good and bad outcomes. And with that $800 that I lost, honestly, it was a good decision. It was the right decision. Obviously, if I could go back in a time machine, I wouldn't do it. But I did not have a crystal ball at the time I made the decision. And I feel fine about what led me to that place. So that is how you avoid that kind of regret. You take your time, you walk in peace, you don't feel rushed, you don't make decisions out of fear and scarcity, and you do make decisions out of trust, knowing that other opportunities will come your way if this one doesn't work out, and asking people for their input and just being very open and calm about it. Now, second type of regret that's a little trickier. If you did something that hurt someone, that could psychologically, spiritually impact them in some way. Obviously, there are terrible examples of this, of someone. A while back, I was talking to someone that when she was younger, there was a drinking and driving incident and her passenger was injured. And I mean, thank God the person is alive, but has some lasting effects from it. And she was saying, I live with regret every day. And you see how the English language needs a couple different words, because that's a different type of regret than, man, I wish I had that $800 back. It was so annoying. Like those are two different concepts, really. We should not have the same word for those two concepts. And I think if you hurt someone, whether it was a small thing, like you used an unkind tone of voice with someone you love, or it was, God forbid, something bigger, the way you deal with that kind of regret and live a life of quote unquote no regrets is you refuse to be brought down into a bad and dark and hopeless place because of it, because that doesn't help anyone. You're not helping whoever you hurt to completely stagnate and self-flagellate and stay in that place. Of course, depending on the severity of what you did, obviously doing some kind of penance and recompense and making things right, that goes without saying. If you did something, again, if you borrowed your neighbor's car and wrecked it, okay, obviously you need to financially fix that and make them whole again. So we're assuming that all of that is done. You've done everything you can do to fix whatever needs to be fixed. But then after that, I think you really have to say, in order to live a life of no quote unquote regrets here, the way I will move forward with that is to make myself as much of a channel of healing and love as possible, to be an instrument of good coming out of this situation. Because when we say living a life of no regrets, again, we don't mean no remorse. Remorse is a different word. Remorse is a word like, man, that really bums me out that happened. I wish that hadn't happened. That is a bummer and I'm sad. So that's remorse. And again, things like penance, recompense, things like that. Doing everything you can to physically, with words or with money or whatever, make up for whatever you did. That's one thing. But when we say no regrets, at least the way I define regrets, you want to live a life of no regrets, meaning you're not weighed down by anything. There are no toxic lies that are keeping you from being a light to the world. So again, let's say, God forbid, you forgot your kid's birthday or something. That's a nice kind of middle of the road example if that happened. I mean, obviously, you'd want to do everything you can to make it up for that kid, do something extra special. Honestly, I'd throw money at the problem. I'd be like, I'm maxing out the credit card. You want to go to New York? Let's go to New York. Like, I mean, I would. And I'd be like, well, now I have a bunch of debt. So I can regret that because there are two different types of regret. So then that would lead me to the financial regret, which would distract me from the emotional regret. That's honestly what I would do. But see, you can't get this kind of, why aren't I on Lex Friedman's podcast? I have good advice. I deserve more than the 400 views that I get on each YouTube podcast episode with this kind of sage wisdom. So and when I'm sick, no less.
We're here for the people.
That's right. I'm a woman of the people. So, living a life of no regrets means, the way I define it, it means you're not going to let anything stop you from being an instrument of love. So, for example, if you hurt someone, if you forgot that kid's birthday, there would almost be a temptation to just lock yourself in your room and sob and like post on your close friends' Instagram about what a terrible human being you are and what a terrible person you are, and just sort of get depressed and then let that spiral. Like, yeah, you said sorry to the kid whose birthday you forgot, but now you're depressed and you're spiraling, and then you're not bringing your A game to that kid, to the rest of your family. You're just kind of spiraling into this depression over the bad thing that you did. How does that help anyone? So what you would want to do in that situation is express sincere remorse, regret, run up that credit card, just max it out, doing something amazing for their birthday. They're like, yeah, my parent forgot my birthday, but I got a thoroughbred horse out of it.
Can they forget every
Which is
year?
a little bit of a problem because we live in an apartment, but we are working it out. That the horse fits in the living room all right. We're working it out. But then just responding with as much positivity as is appropriate, depending on what the hurt was and how long ago it was, and just saying, I'm here to love, and I did this thing that was contra to love. I made this mistake, but because of that, I promise you, I'm going to bring 10x the love to this situation, and I am going to be part of whatever good may come out of this, because we do know this is just a theological fact. Even the universe hippies are in on this one. This is most religions agree on this, that when something bad happens, there's always an opportunity for good and beauty to come from it. And that does not mean that it's okay, it's cool that the bad thing happened. It just means that it's an opportunity for growth. So from the Christian worldview, the greatest thing that ever happened, what we would say is death was conquered, the resurrection. Jesus conquered death. That doesn't mean like it was cool that they crucified God. It was cool. They took this innocent guy who literally never like did anything. He just helped people and they crucified him. I mean, we're not like, that's amazing that happened. That's so good that people did that. It was a bad thing, but something really good came from it that wouldn't have happened if the bad thing hadn't happened. And that is true. That's on a large level. It's like a macrocosm of what we see in everyday life. So let's say you snap at your spouse and you realize that was actually pretty rude. I was pretty nasty to my spouse. Well, there's an opportunity for you to now be a channel of something really good coming from that situation. If you really are super nice to them or whatever. Maybe again, I'm keep money's on my mind. So you buy them something. I don't know, whatever. Oh, you know what you could do? You could fund their comedy special. You could be like, I think you should spend that money. I think you should do it. I think you should get all that extra stuff that costs thousands and thousands of dollars. And don't worry about, if we just waste the money, it's fine. So that's something you could do if you use a bad tone of voice with your spouse. But I think that's the key to living a life of no regrets. If your regret has to do with you hurt, neglected, abandoned, physically harmed, emotionally harmed somebody, you do the recompense that you need to do, 100%. But then you have to move forward and say, I'm not going to let toxic lies stop me from being a source of light and love, because who knows, you might actually be the instrument through which that new good thing that's going to come into the world because of the bad thing, you might be an instrument for that if you'll just stop feeling sorry for yourself and making it about you and just moving forward with as much love as you possibly can. That could actually be a beautiful thing, and you could be part of the healing, and you could be part of the good if you just take your ego totally out of it and just be willing to be that channel of love. So that is how you deal with the second type of regret. And I just like to petition whoever is in charge of the English language. I would like to petition them that we get 2 different words for regret, because or at least 2, because I think that the words that we currently have do not nearly cover it. Okay, so fly out to Houston for the filming of my comedy special, November 15th. Get your tickets immediately. These shows are absolutely going to sell out. Links are in the show notes. And Caitlin, that is about it for this episode. We will go straight into the after party, which we do every week on Patreon, patreon.com/thisisjen. We have a couple different levels, but at the most basic level, you hang out with us for the after party every week, where we keep talking on this subject or others. I sometimes share some more kind of behind the scenes, off the record stuff. And I can't wait to see you over there, and we'll be back next week.